Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nissa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is another food prep planning and preserving video, but we're going to focus on a specific task today as well. So I do my supply runs every 8 to 9 weeks, and I do videos that are basically like day in the lives of my kitchen, which is pretty much just everything that I do in my kitchen for over a span of a couple of days shared. That sun was a bit of an issue, so I've just shifted. And so it's just showing you how I use the food that I buy when I buy it in bulk and how I feed the family with it. So I don't normally do very many single subject videos because I just find them difficult. I do everything by voiceover. I have notes and I voice over it because I can't talk while I'm in my kitchen. The kids do everything around me. There's normally music running and everything else is just too difficult, and I can't make the time to do it. I can't kick everyone out for a morning to get it done and still manage to cook all the meals that I cook and supervise schooling and get all the videos done and things like that. So I don't generally make content for the sake of making content. Generally speaking, everything that I film is stuff that I'm doing because I want and need and have to do it, not because I'm making a video. So it makes it really hard to do single subject videos. But in saying that, I was doing a bit of a short for this sort of thing, which again, I'm pretty sucky at. And I wanted to cover this in a little bit more detail, but I couldn't make it work as a single video. So what I've basically done is the whole beginning of this video pretty much is about instant porridge mix, which is something that I've integrated into our breakfasts and stuff here. And then the rest of the video was the rest of the day. So it's pretty similar to what I normally do, a little bit more focus on that particular thing. So come and join me and I'll see you again at the end and we'll cover it all. So before I started the instant porridge, I did start some prep for dinner for later. This is why my kitchen doesn't work as a single subject kitchen. So I filled a cast iron baking tray with big cloves of elephant garlic, sprinkled with salt and drizzled with oil to slow roast for a couple of hours while other things get done. So I've done that, got it in the oven, got it out of the way. So instant porridge mix. For me, in winter, the kids like porridge, and I'm happy to make porridge, but it is generally 0 degrees in my kitchen of a morning during winter for a couple of months, and sitting there making porridge becomes quite a chore. It's cold and miserable and I don't really want to do it. The kids are more than capable of making porridge in a pot on the stove, but they're very inconsistent in their results. Some make it better than others, some add too much, some don't, and it doesn't work fantastically well. I'm better off making a pot of it myself. But I'd prefer not to. So in summer they have cereal, yogurt and granola, and in winter they just prefer something warm. So we do a cooked breakfast later on in the day, which is Daryl and my lunch, but for breakfast they generally help themselves. So the idea was to make some instant porridge. Now you can buy those little instant porridge sachets, but they're quite expensive and a lot of them have milk products in them. So I didn't want to use that. So I wanted to make my own. The idea was that, like if you're hiking or whatever, you could put 1/4 to 1/2 cup of the porridge mix into a thermal cup, fill it with boiling water, put the lid on it, 5 minutes, and you've got porridge. And that's what we were working on, so that the kids could serve themselves. I wanted to do a couple of different flavors because I make them a couple of different flavors in standard porridge as well. So what I've started doing was I prepped all the stuff that I wanted to use using the Thermomix. So I've got rolled oats, which I turned to instant oats. I will say too that a lot of people suggest overnight oats, but the kids don't like it cold. So it's possible that I could soak oats overnight and then they could add some of these, I could leave the instant oats out of this mix. They could add a scoop of flavoring and then add boiling water. I might give that a go at some point because I would prefer rolled oats than instant oats as well. But for the moment, once they're soaked, they have to be used too though, whereas this dry mix, if they eat it one day and they don't eat it the next, it's not that big a deal. But anyway, so I just buy rolled oats because I prefer them in a lot of things anyway. I don't buy instant oats, I buy rolled ones. I use my Thermomix to grind it up into oat flour or instant oats. I also bought bags of the dehydrated banana chips and I ground them up in the Thermomix into a sort of a powder. There's a fair bit of moisture in them. They don't powder particularly well, but they go small enough and that's the main thing. So I ground up a whole bag of those and stuck them in a jar. I thought getting everything into jars all at once is going to make it easier to make the next batch. So this batch is a bit of an effort, but theoretically the next batch when I make it will be a lot more simple. I managed to get some freeze-dried raspberries on clearance from the Melbourne Food Depot, so I ground them to a powder as well. This is not always going to be an ingredient I can access because it's expensive, but this bag was fairly inexpensive in comparison to how much they are, and I'm only using 40 grams at a time, and it was 650 grams, so it'll last me a little while. I have powdered everything because of the fact that we're only looking at a 5-minute cooking time with boiling water only. We're not going to simmer this, we're not going to put it on the stove, we're going to add boiling water to it, stir it, put the lid on the thermal cup, and that's it. So the finer it is, the more it's going to cook and break down and thicken and amalgamate in there. I decided to grind the sugar as well for better dispersion through the powdered mix, but also because again it will dissolve easier in the hot water. I mixed some molasses in with some of the white sugar for brown sugar, although my molasses was very solid. It's a fairly old jar and it's been cold, so it was quite chunky. I tried warming it up a little bit with warm water on the outside of the jar. It it went fine. I put it in the jar and there was bits of molasses stuck all over the inside of the jar, so I actually poured it back into the Thermomix and re-blended it and then poured it back into the jar, but those bits of molasses were still stuck on the edge of the jar, but that's fine. The whole purpose of putting the molasses in with the sugar is because that's what brown sugar is, or an alternative to brown sugar, but the other purpose was so that the molasses wouldn't cause things to clump in the actual porridge mix. And the amount of blending that happened is enough that it's not going to do that, and that's fine. I also blended some of my coconut milk powder here with the sugar because I had the Thermomix going and I was doing this already. I don't normally bother with this because I've got all the other stuff ground up now and already in jars. I don't want a dirtier Thermomix bowl to do it. And the little chunks of coconut milk powder that end up in there, they dissolve in the hot water anyway. It's not a big deal. But the coconut milk powder is a vegan one from Hello Pure, and it doesn't have, it's got tapioca in it, I think, is the only other thing it's got in it, so it does tend to clump up a little bit, and I buy it in a 15 kilo block that goes in a tub, so it does get a bit of moisture in it and then it clumps up a little bit, so sometimes you do have to break it up a little bit to use it. I also have some powdered peanut butter from Macro Mike to use for flavour and a protein add as well. I also have some protein powders from that I might give a go in here too, just to boost that first morning eats. The idea is to make it a filling and a bit more protein in that breakfast cereal to get them through a little bit further in this weather. Now, whilst these jars look wonderful filled and they're convenient in a lot of ways, they are inconvenient in others. You can only put a certain amount in them. You sometimes have to make sure once you use a bit out of the top to give them another good shake, or the oats in the bottom stay there and they haven't been blended through. I actually have some really big rectangle plastic containers coming to make more at a time because my kids will go through it really quick. But at the same time, these jars look really nice, so there's that trade-off there. But we're going for convenience here, not for, and I obviously don't have this, picture perfect pristine kitchen where the jars are really that big a deal. These are half-gallon jars, as an aside, and I found that 500 or 600 grams of instant oats is the maximum, depending on how much you're adding on top. Depending on your add-ins, depends on how much oats you've got there, because obviously it's got a limited capacity. The kids used to love a peanut butter and jelly flavoured oat bar bake that I used to make when they were younger. They're not as keen on it anymore, the actual bake, but I thought that the flavour would still appeal. So I added my oats, some of the powdered peanut butter powder, about 50 grams, which means that each of these Macro Mike jars is only 3 serves of about 500 grams of oats. So it's, there's an expense to it, so you have to think about that when you're making these as well. Though the protein powders are like a 40-gram serve, which might be something that I would use instead. We will see how we go with all of that. Sugar and milk powder are going to be variable for each person when making this. I've now reduced the oats in these jars to the 500 gram amount and added an extra 100 grams of the sugar coconut milk powder mix, about 150 grams of each, though you can reduce that to taste, of course. It really depends on your add-ins and who's eating it. I find that if I don't make it that little bit sweeter than I would eat it, then the kids want to add honey or maple syrup or something to it, and I can't control that quantity, so I find it a better option to just use that bit of extra sugar to make it work, and then they don't have to add anything to it. It is exactly what is served is what they eat. I went with about 40 grams of the raspberries. It seems to be plenty and they're not cheap, so it works to add that flavour without excessive cost. It will look overly full at first, but as soon as you start shaking it, it all settles and it sort of fills all the little air gaps and it will not be too full. I did find that it needed a really good shake after the first couple of scoops, as I said, out just to get it all blended. Or you can tip it into a bowl, whisk it, or mix it all in a bowl initially and whisk it and then add it into the jars. I sort of just wanted to make it look pretty for the video too. And it looked nice, and this was the idea was that it would look kind of fancy. But you know, you can only fit certain size measuring cups in the tops of these jars as well, whereas if you've got a larger container, then that wouldn't be a big deal. The second batch I made was chopped banana one. So again, 600 grams of oats in the bottom, the same in sugar and coconut milk powder, but this time I added chopped hazelnut powdered peanut butter. And I think one of the peanut proteins from Macro Mike would work really well here too. Or even just some cocoa powder, but cocoa powder is going to cause some bitterness, and then you've got the issue with is it sweet enough as well, which we used to run into making chocolate porridge on the stove as well. You use cocoa powder. If the kids were making chocolate porridge, they'd go a little bit too much cocoa powder, and all of a sudden the whole thing was quite bitter and they needed more sugar to fix it, and yeah, it went on a little bit like that. The third one I made for this time was simple brown sugar cinnamon, plenty of coconut milk powder and brown sugar, and a generous amount of cinnamon. Now this is my favourite flavour, but Daryl is really not keen on cinnamon, so we've been making it without recently. I did wonder if powdered maple would work quite well. I am also getting a jar of vanilla sugar going, which would be awesome too. The trick being I need dry ingredients to make it long lasting on the shelf and easy for the kids. If I allow add-ins, like if it wasn't all dry, like if I said, you know, I'm not going to use maple powder, they can use some maple syrup, I can't control the quantity, as I said. So this is a little bit about being able to control the rate at which they consume certain things, though they have pretty much free access to this as a breakfast or a snack, which is why I'm looking to bump the protein in it and drop some of the sugar. If I use some of the flavoured protein powders too, they have some sweeteners in them. Macro Mike is fairly clean, and they have had an end of financial year sale on recently. We've been using it for ice cream as well, so I ordered a bunch of that and I'll give it a go. But I can buy unflavoured as well and sweeten how I desire. We're not real keen on the fava bean and that sort of thing protein, so we like the almond protein preferably, which is still fairly expensive, and I find that the Macro Mike is a similar price, but it comes in all these variety of flavours that I don't have to worry about making my own. My kids are pretty active, and I tend to lean towards using raw sugar rather than sweeteners, because sugar is, well, it's, you know, sugar's not great for you, but it's still a whole ingredient. It's not a artificial sweetener. But I'm not adverse to them either. I love coconut sugar, but it is far too expensive for me to use. And I don't mind a monk fruit erythritol blend, but it has a bit of a cooling effect in the mouth, which isn't great in a heated item. It's a little bit odd. It works well in things like the ice cream and stuff because it's cold, but if you put it in something that you're serving hot, it's a bit odd to have that cooling effect from the erythritol in a hot dish. Yeah, strange. There's a quick time jump here to a 0-degree morning in my dressing gown so that I can show you how we prepared it. So all I do is put about half a cup of porridge mix into the thermal coffee cup, and then I put up to 1 cup of water in. Now the water again is going to be a choice on how thick you like it, how long you intend to let it sit, and the amount of add-ins into your porridge. So the more oats that are in your mix, the more water you're going to need, because that's what creates the thickness and that's what absorbs the liquid. But if you've got a higher quantity of milk powders or sweeteners or other things, they're not going to absorb the liquid at the same rate, so you will have to experiment a little bit with how much water you want to add for the ingredient list that you use. As I said, I do prefer a rolled oat porridge, but cold kitchen in the winter, it makes it a bit of an ordeal, and this allows the kids to prepare it for themselves, and they've been eating it throughout the day as a snack as well, which is fine by me because it's fairly healthy. I'm going to bump the protein in it as much as I can to keep the flavours adequate, and drop the sugar as much as I can as well, but I'm pretty okay with the ratios that are in there for the quantity that per serve and things like that they're eating. As I said, the kids are pretty active, so it's not a huge deal. The kids can go through these half-gallon jars in 2 to 3 days though. So as I said, I'm getting some larger containers to see how I go making it in slightly larger batches. And it makes sense because I regularly make a 750 gram pack of rolled oats for them as stove porridge. So this is about 1.5 to 1.8 kilos of oats in these 3 jars. Pretty, you know, makes sense. So back to the rest of the day here. So that was my instant porridge, sort of a bit in there, but as I said, it just didn't really make a whole video. Not consistent consistently, like, not in comparison to how my videos normally are. And part of that, we're getting towards, you know, the whole business side of things with the YouTube algorithm and everything else. YouTube likes your videos to be consistently the same length, because if people start watching less time on a video, then YouTube doesn't like it. So by keeping my videos fairly consistently lengthed, then nearly everyone watches the same sort of length of it as well, and YouTube prefers that. So sorry. I do have to think of these things sometimes as well. So anyway, back to the day. I made up some of the French rolls that I'm still working on getting just so, but I think I'm pretty much there, though my shaping could do some work. And the purpose of these is because we're doing that roasted garlic. So I can fit 7 of these baguette shapes in my barbecue at the same time. I'm really liking these baguette trays that I got from Amazon. They're cuttable, so I could cut them to fit into the 2 trays, and I can fit 7 in the barbecue, though I am better off just doing 1 tray of 5 at a time if I can, because with 7 in the barbecue, it blocks the whole, it covers the whole surface. Like, I have everything that I bake is up on colanders, but it covers that whole surface, and the heat doesn't move as well. You end up with all this heat on the bottom, and it doesn't circulate over the top properly, and you don't get the nice browning on the tops of the buns, because there's not as much heat hitting the top, and that radiance from hitting the hood of the barbecue and bouncing back down to the buns. So 7, they can end up quite blonde and a little bit brown on the bottom, but if I do them in only lots of 5, then it's just more work to get them in there, sort of thing. Daryl and I have been discussing options in regards to ovens as we redo the kitchen. We were considering a commercial range to use, a second-hand one. You can get them anywhere from $800 to $2,000, which is a lot of money. But with the amount of food that I cook and the time that it could save me, it may be worth doing if we can. Yeah, we will see. I don't know. But we do have the wood stove that we're hoping to set up as well once we get the kitchen done, but I can't see myself using it in summer. It's just too hot. So we still need gas, and we are struggling with just the 2 hot plates that I currently have. It would be really nice if they were purely canning hot plates and we had the stove, sort of thing. So I don't know what we're going to do. A big 6 burner with a 900mm oven underneath, a commercial one, would be awesome, and I keep an eye out on Marketplace, but I just don't know if I can swing that kind of cash on that kind of thing, but we will see. Anyway, that was a bit of a squirrel. So, because I'm making garlic bread, I thought we'd do bolognese for dinner. I haven't minced up the beef trim from Costco as yet, so that's still vacuum sealed in the bottom of the fridge. So I'm going to use the beef mince that came with the hamper. This was a 1.8 kilo of beef mince, and we got it really cheap. It was part of a $10 meat pack or something when we got the hamper last month. So I decided to make some pasta up. Nothing beats fresh pasta if I have the time and stuff to do it. It's much more convenient to use dried pasta, and depending on the availability of eggs, it's potentially cheaper, but it just doesn't feel the same. And this bolognese is going to be a very, very basic bolognese, so the pasta will just help with that. So I mixed up a double batch of pasta for us for dinner so we could all have it. I used a very simple recipe as I didn't have any sourdough starter ready to go, which is approximately 100 grams of flour per egg and a drizzle of olive oil, pinch of salt. Add some water if you need to, depending on the size of your eggs. Bring it together in the Thermomix till it's in small ball stage, and then once it's in that small ball stage, tip it out into dough mat and bring it together into more of a ball, more, you know, emulsified, and then put that in an airtight container to rest for at least half an hour. Doing a very simple meat sauce today with the mince from the hamper, because I'll do the big veggie filled bulk batch when I mince up the beef trim, so it's a really, really basic meat sauce. I minced some onion in the Thermomix, threw in a bag of the frozen mushrooms and a bunch of garlic and let it all cook off. Once the liquid had cooked off and it smelled nice and rich, I added the mince. This, as I said, was a 1.8 kilo mince. It was from the hamper, and I can't remember how much it cost, but I think it was there was a meat pack for $10 which had the mince and some chicken and something with it as well. And I added one of the 800 gram tins of crushed tomatoes, let the beef cook off. It was still partially frozen, so I just broke it up throughout, like put the lid on it so it steamed and defrosted, and broke it up as I went along. The rolls had finished their second proof, so I got them into the oven after the garlic had finished. I broke up the beef, started adding the rest of the sauce, some passata, and I used some water to clean the jar out and added that as well. Tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce, along with some vegeta and just some added herbs and salt as I tasted it. As I said, it was a really simple tomato-based meat sauce, not even really a bolognese in my definition of a bolognese, but tomato-based meat sauce, and it was going to be tasty regardless. While that was simmering and all the flavours are combining, I rolled out the pasta using my KitchenAid attachment. This works really well, but I do struggle with the height of it, having to lift my hands up to hold that pasta as it's going up that tall. I also find it difficult because it gets dirty no matter how I store it, and it doesn't come apart to clean. So I use dough to clean it, a bit like you use like blue tack to clean things. I'd run the dough through it over and over again and clean out the dust that settles in it. But it drives me a bit nuts. I have been considering one of the, I think it's Marcato. I think that's the name of it. The rollers with the motor, so it could be attached to a bench and used from there. Atlas Marcato, something like that. I'll reconsider once we have the new kitchen set up and I know how much bench space I have, which I'm hoping is more than I currently have. And I'm hoping to have some wooden bench as well as stainless steel bench that we can keep clean and polished and stuff. So I just roll it from the thickest to the thin and then use my pastry cutter to slice it into strips and hang it on the pasta drying rack to get a bit of a skin before I'm ready to cook it off. This pasta rack came from, I want to say Nicaea bought it for me, but if I'm wrong, please forgive me, from my Amazon wishlist, because the plastic ones that I've been buying have all died. And this one's a timber one, and I did pick it because it comes apart into pieces. And so I've been able to use it. And once I finish using it, I can pull it all apart and it goes back in the box, which is amazing. I may get another one of these because it still doesn't hold a huge amount of pasta, but the fact that I can put it up and down, it works wonderfully. It doesn't get dirty because it goes back in the box and things like that. The garlic has cooled a bit, so I get to peeling it. The cloves just slip out of the skins when it has been roasted like this. It's sweet and soft, and that bit of salt and oil, it's just our absolute favourite way to eat garlic. A little bit of caramelisation is good, but if you take it too far, the garlic goes quite chewy and slightly unpleasant, rather than that soft, creamy texture. I added some salt generously and mashed it all up. This is what the bread looked like when it came out of the oven. I did forget to score it, but it didn't blow out too bad, so it turned out okay. I added some Nuttelex into the garlic, and then I actually used my immersion blender to emulsify it, but it looks like I somehow missed recording that. I had to size the container up and obviously go looking for the head for the immersion blender, and then I mustn't have hit record or something, I'm not sure. But using the immersion blender with the Nuttelex or ghee or butter or whatever you're using with the garlic turns it into this sort of airy, emulsified butter, and it just changes the texture and it's wonderful. I buttered the bread in 2 different ways. I'm sort of testing all of this out still as I figure out the French bread that I'm making, and then put them in the oven. Now it's quite dark, and as I've said before, having someone in the kitchen can make meals really awkward to film, and I'm guessing I had help. So there's no photo of the final meal, unfortunately. I have been trying a lot harder to make sure that I at least take a photo of every meal that I make lately, so that even if I don't have footage of the meal being made, I have at least a photo of it. But the pasta cooked up lovely and silky, as you can see, and the bread was delicious. So that was another day. That was basically only one day in my kitchen. That whole one? Yeah, one day in the kitchen. So I spent the morning doing the instant porridge, and it was really hard to film it on purpose. It takes a lot longer to make something when I'm filming it on purpose, like when I'm getting things ready to go on purpose. So that's why I don't do it a lot. I make these things, but I normally just do it slapdash and I film and you get what you get. When I'm trying to make it look nice, it just takes so long to do, and I just don't have that kind of time, because all the stuff that you see on my videos is real time. Like I have to cook all that food or we don't eat. So none of the meals that I make are made and then put away or anything like that. All the meals that I make are to eat in the moment. So it makes it hard. I do feel frustrated sometimes because I can't do these like single subject videos or cook something purposely to film it or chat while I'm cooking it or anything like that, like so many other channels. But this is my life for the moment, and hey, it might change once we get the kitchen sorted and as the kids get a bit older and all the rest of it. But for right now, this is all I can do, and I have to just deal with it because that's what life is. And I always say that it's not worth getting too frustrated or upset or anything over it, because then it makes it harder to cope with, and I have to cope with it. So this is what it is for the moment. So instant porridge, I will try and put some ratios and stuff in the bottom. I have managed to put a short together for it, and I'm going to try and get it up on the website, or I might just do a PDF for the Patreon for the moment, like I did with the flatbread, so that I can then transfer it onto the website, because I still haven't got that new website that I worked on. I haven't got it swapped over yet, so we will see how we go. There's just too much to do and not enough hours in the day. I think I'm struggling a little bit with motivation too at the moment, because we've moved from the sort of 6 weekly trips to the 8 to 9 weekly trips. I'm missing that downtime a little bit. My downtime with mum that I get for those couple of days on that grocery trip sort of is a little bit of a reset for me. As much as it's an exhausting trip, it's still a little bit of a reset because it's somewhere new. I don't have to worry about the kids as well. I don't generally cook very much food. I do make dinner for mum, but it's a lot simpler. She has an air fryer and electricity and everything else, so it's a lot simpler to make food, and we order in one of those nights too, and I normally go and get lunch when I'm out and stuff like that. So I think this 9-week stretch is a little bit harder to tolerate without that sort of reset, but that's it. It is what it is, isn't it? So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video. Hopefully I can get that Q&A or the 6-year video, or I don't know, maybe you'll just get more food for the moment. We will just have to see how things pan out, and I'm sorry that I can't be more consistent. So I'll see you guys next time.